This was one of the first monoplanes of the US Armed Forces in the 1930s, but as many other aircraft of the era, it became almost completely obsolete by the time World War II broke out. It still saw action at various theaters of the war, used by several countries. So today we will take a look at the Curtiss P-36 Hawk. Just like many other air power in the 1930s, the US Army Air Corps also realized the biplane has reached the end of its potential, and the technological advances in aviation now allowed the old metal monoplanes to outperform the old biplanes. At that time the Air Corps still used the old Curtiss P-6E and Boeing P-12E biplanes. A herald of the new era was the Boeing B-9 bomber, which was the first all-metal monoplane of the US Army Air Corps, and could reach 188 miles an hour speed. It was the fastest bomber of the world at that time, and it showed that the new monoplane bombers can be faster than the old biplane fighters. Though the Boeing P-26 Peashooter, which first flew in 1932, was the first monoplane fighter to enter service with the Army Air Corps, it was very much a conventional design, with its open cockpit, fixed undercarriage, and external braces on the wings. Just a year after the P-26 entered service, Curtiss started a private project under the name Model 75. The aim was to develop a new generation fighter aircraft, which would accumulate all the new developments in aircraft technology. The new design was a low-wing all-metal monoplane, with a closed cockpit, internally braced wings, using the Wright R1670 engine delivering 775 horsepower, and featuring a retractable undercarriage. The distinctive design which rotated 90 degrees to lay flat with the wing surface. This was actually a Boeing design, and later was used on the P-40 fighter and also on the Vought F4U Corsair. The first prototype of the new Curtiss design flew in May 1935 and reached a speed of 283 miles an hour. It was just in time to be able to participate in the Army Air Corps contest that year for the replacement of the P-26 Peashooter. The US Army Air Corps announced a fly-off between the proposals at Wright Field. Seversky entered their SEV-2XP model, Northrop their 3E design, and Curtiss their Model 75. However, the Seversky prototype was damaged just before the competition, and a few weeks later the Northrop plane crashed into the sea on a test flight, causing the fly-off to be postponed to April 1936. There were rumors that the damage on the Seversky aircraft was deliberate, as they entered their fixed landing gear design, and when they learned about the Northrop and Curtiss competitors, they didn't want to put their plane up against those. By the next year, Seversky indeed changed their entry to the SEV-1XP design, which was a single-seat plane with retractable landing gear. The Northrop design re-entered the competition under the name Vought V-141, as the Vought company bought the rights for that design from Northrop. The delay also gave Curtiss some time to further refine their proposal, changing the engine for the more powerful Pratt & Whitney R1830, delivering 900 horsepower, redesigning the engine cowling, and changing the cockpit to improve visibility. A new contender also arrived, as Consolidated proposed their P-30 design as well this year. Though the Curtiss Model 75 was the fastest from the four planes, in the end the Seversky P-35 won the competition, and was awarded a contract for 77 aircraft. However, the Army Air Corps was not fully convinced that Seversky will be able to fulfill the current and possible future orders, and as a backup they ordered 3 units from the Curtiss plane as well, under the designation Y-1 P-36. Maybe this would be a good time to clear up the naming. Initially the company usually referred the fixed landing gear export model as Model 75. Later they called it Model 75H. The first iteration of the prototype, with a retractable undercarriage, was referred as Model 75A, and the final configuration of the prototype as Model 75B. Later all export models carried the H prefix, ranging from H75A1 to H75A9, with different engine and armament configurations. The fighter had many different variants over the years. We can take a look at some of the most interesting ones. There were several variants tested to improve the armament of the aircraft, like the P-36C model with 2 additional 30 caliber machine guns in the wings, or the XP-36D model with 2 50 caliber machine guns in the nose and 4 30 caliber machine guns in the wings, or the XP-36F model, which carried 2 23mm cannons under the wings. Since the aircraft was underpowered compared to its opponents, there were also efforts to improve the performance. One of these was the Model 75R variant, with an external turbo supercharger installed under the nose and an intercooler under the wing. Another variant, the XP-42 or Model 75S, featured a longer nose with a streamlined cowling. Though the changes improved the speed of the aircraft, they caused constant engine overheating problems, which, despite various modifications, were unsolved. Similarly, the search for higher performance led to the XP-37, which was built with the Ellison 1710 inline engine, and the cockpit was moved to the back on it to maintain the weight distribution. But this model was a failure as well. The XP-40 was the prototype for the P-40 fighters, modified from the 10th production P-36 with a new nose and a supercharged Ellison V1710 engine. I have already made a video about the P-40, so if you want to know more about the history of that fighter, check it out. The P-36 was 28 feet 6 inches long, with a wingspan of 37 feet 4 inches. It had an empty weight of 4,567 pounds and a maximum takeoff weight of 6,010 pounds. It used the Pratt & Whitney R1830 14-cylinder engine, producing 1,050 horsepower. The plane could reach a maximum speed of 313 miles an hour and a cruise speed of 270 miles an hour. It had a range of 860 miles and a service ceiling of 32,700 feet. The standard armament included 130 and 150 caliber machine guns in the engine cowling. Later variants could carry up to 300 pounds of bombs. The P-36 started to arrive to the units in 1938, but it had some teething problems. And despite being just put into service, a year later the Army Air Corps already put in orders for its successor, the P-40. That meant the P-36 saw little action with the US forces, as by 1941 it was mostly replaced by newer, more modern fighters. But still the type was one of the first to see action and score kills, as a few of them were still in service at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, when the Japanese forces attacked the island. 5 of them managed to take off during the battle and scored 2 kills against the Japanese planes. Though they didn't see much use in World War II by the US forces, the P-36 appeared in many theaters of the war, used by several different countries. One of the most notable was the French Air Force, who ordered 100 of them initially in 1938, and used them under the name Curtiss H-75C. Later orders were put in for another 100 units, plus 135 of the upgraded H-75A3 model, featuring a stronger 1200 horsepower engine. But most of these never reached France before the German victory over the country in June 1940. Some ended up in Morocco, and the ones undelivered were diverted to the British, who put them to use under the name Mohawk 3. Altogether, 316 H-75 models were delivered to the French, and though they only made up about 15% of their fighter force, they accounted for almost 1/3 of the combat kills against the Germans, despite being outmatched by the new Messerschmitt Bf 109s. The French Hawks played a role again in 1942, during the Allied invasion of North Africa, when they engaged the US Navy F-4F Wildcats. The British also used the P-36, although not as frontline fighters over Europe, where it would have been hopelessly outmatched against the German fighters. Some 230 Hawks made it to the British from the diverted French orders and from French pilots who flew to England after the armistice. They were kept in readiness while there was a danger of German invasion, but late 1941 they were sent overseas and were mainly used in India and Burma as bomber escorts and patrol aircraft. They were also used from time to time in ground support role. The Chinese used a number of the fixed landing gear version of the P-36 against the Japanese invasion. They planned to license build the Cyclone-powered H-75A5 variant, but the production was eventually moved to India instead. After the fall of France, the Germans captured many French H-75s, and additional 13 got into German hands after they invaded Norway. They agreed to sell 44 of them to Finland, who used them against the Soviet forces with great success. The initial 7.5mm machine guns on these planes were later swapped for 50 caliber Brownings or sometimes 12.7mm Soviet Berezin types. The Netherlands also ordered 24 of these planes, but the Germans invaded the country before they were delivered, so they ended up in the Dutch East Indies, fighting against the Japanese forces. The Curtiss P-36 was a very modern aircraft when it was designed, but suffered the fate of many mid-1930s planes, which all became obsolete very quickly because of the lightning-fast evolution of aviation technology before and during World War II. Though it was mostly obsolete by the time the war broke out, it still took part in many operations at different parts of the world, and though it was not the fastest, the most heavily armed, or the most modern fighter, it always put up a good fight wherever it was used. Also, thanks to the experiences with the P-36, Curtiss developed the P-40 in a short time, which was a great asset to the Allied war effort. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave a like, subscribe to my channel, and in the comments let me know if there's any interesting events or vehicles you'd like to see.